a bunch of posts and videos that I've been seeing recently, plus the fact that Peacemaker Season 2 is right around the corner, I want to talk about what I think we'll see in the DCU and some of my current predictions and thoughts about it. But before that, good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. My name is Aiden, and today we'll be talking about the future of DC with a focus on rumors, confirmations, and upcoming projects. There will probably be plenty of spoilers going forward, so you've all been warned. So, as we know, Peacemaker is going to come out in mid-August. And based off of the trailers, as well as some of the comments made by James Gunn, it's fairly safe to assume that it will be a small multiversal storyline. And this will just be so that it cleans up the crap left from the DCEU and the new DCU, so that we can have an easier transition out of the DCEU into the DCU. It'll probably just clean up some of the small continuity errors that happened because of Peacemaker Season 1 and the Suicide Squad movie from 2021. But that's just assuming that James Gunn wants to keep both the movies that he directed in the past mostly canon. And the plot isn't going to be like Deadpool and Wolverine or Spider-Man No Way Home, where that deals with a lot of different multiversal aspect stuff, where it has a bunch of different multiverses. It's just going to be about one other world and how Peacemaker is going to deal with that one other world, really just so that we can have our new DCU without it being a big convoluted mess. Luckily, we know that a bunch of characters have been confirmed or heavily implied to appear in the DCU in the future, and we know that some of the actors from the DCEU will come back. And some of them will portray new roles, and some of them will portray old roles. Like, we're getting the Zolo, who played Blue Beetle, we're getting him back as Jaime Reyes again. We're getting Jason Momoa as Lobo in Supergirl, and we're getting plenty of other characters and people who are coming back from the more recent years of the DCEU, and they're just going to portray the roles that they portrayed in that. We also know that we might get some of the main characters from the DCEU into the DCU, but add new roles, obviously what they did with Jason Momoa, him becoming Lobo. But James Gunn also talked about Henry Cavill potentially coming back in the future of the DCU, portraying somebody else other than Superman. We know that we're obviously going to be getting back Frank Grillo and John Cena and others like them back into the DCU, as confirmed by the new Superman movie and Creature Commandos, very obviously. But we've also gotten some obscure references and Easter eggs that I didn't really notice until somebody else pointed it out, which is that there are plenty of characters that could come into the DCU from Elseworlds projects, like Robert Pattinson's Batman, which, if I'm going to be honest, I'm not really a fan of him coming into the DCU. Not really because the tones are different or whatever. I believe that it's good to have a lot of differing tones in comic books because it can show you how large this world really is. But really because everything that James Gunn says about how he wants to introduce Batman into the DCU doesn't really fit with Pattinson, at least not right now. And if you haven't really been keeping up, James Gunn has basically outright said so many times that his favorite Robin is Damian Wayne, and that he wants to introduce him into the DCU along with Batman in the Batman movie that they do, Brave and the Bold. And now he's outright said that he doesn't want Pattinson in the DCU because of the clashing tones and wanting to let Matt Reeves make his own decisions with the Batman trilogy. But in the background of Superman, there's a scene with a broadcast that talks about the floods in Gotham, which, if you'll remember, the Batman ends with Riddler blowing up dams surrounding Gotham City and causing massive flooding in Gotham. So yes, it could be a completely separate story in the DCU, but it could also be a nod to Pattinson being inaugurated into the DCU, which, if Gunn introduces Pattinson, it could work. I really hope he's just throwing people off with the Brave and the Bold announcements and doesn't actually straight up introduce Damian Wayne and skip the entire Bat family. I just mean in the case of if he uses Robert Pattinson's Batman. There are plenty of ways that you can get to Damian Wayne Robin faster. If that dynamic duo movie about Jason Todd and Dick Grayson being Robin at the same time comes out, if it becomes an actual DCU title and not Elseworlds, then that's a quicker way to get to Damian's Robin, because then you can have a standalone movie with Tim Drake's Robin and then move on to Damian after, and then have Tim Drake go and do something else like lead Young Justice or whatever. With other Easter eggs from Superman and comments from James Gunn, we know that the characters that we saw in the mural in the Hall of Justice, or at least some of them in some form, will appear pretty soon, it seems like, which could be cool because we can get them in cameos from upcoming movies like Clayface, Supergirl, and maybe the shows like Lanterns and the Jimmy Olsen show that's coming out, and all the other different projects that are in development. But we're also going to get a bunch of other projects that won't be announced until they're like really far into development, and it's most likely that we'll see the Justice Society in a show or movie, especially if some of the like characters are confirmed to be active by Gunn, which some of them are. It would make sense for there to be like a prequel that like establishes these characters, as well as like establishes Wonder Woman, because there have been multiple versions of Wonder Woman, and this could show the version of Wonder Woman who worked with along the side of the Justice League as well as the Justice Society. Maybe this is a Wonder Woman who doesn't age, like some adaptations have decided to go with. But we also know that there is a Wonder Woman movie in development, and it's possibly going to be built on before with the other projects that are coming out, like the Paradise Lost one. I wouldn't be surprised if they mention Diana or have a scene with her or establish her character in some way towards the end of it. We also know that the Teen Titans movie is pretty far into development with the script at least, and we might have some nods to the older characters' legacies with the Teen Titans characters. Like if you have Donna Troy, Wally West, and Jaime Reyes, you might mention their mentors, which would be Wonder Woman, The Flash, and Ted Kord's Blue Beetle. That could be awesome because it would build up a lot of the DCU, and it could show the pillars of the past, and it would get us some good adaptations of these characters that we aren't often seen getting adaptations, or even just adapting the actual pillars of the DCU in such a good way, like with the Wonder Woman movie and The Brave and the Bold. Wonder Woman will most likely get at least some mention of her in Paradise Lost. I think that's pretty certain. But they might also go a different route with her character. Might do the like DC Rebirth route, which is kind of clearing up all her canon misconceptions and trying to figure out what actually happened through the New 52 and whatnot. And it could show us a Diana that's been alive for all 300 years of Heroes. Maybe she was the first superhero or whatnot. Like it could be something like that. That would be pretty cool. Or maybe they'll go the absolute Wonder Woman route, which is like taking her and having her have such a close relationship with Cersei. But since we've already established Cersei in Creature Commandos, I don't think they're gonna go that route. At least not yet. I mean, they could. It's not like completely impossible, but it's definitely not one of the routes that seems like it's gonna be more plausible. James Gunn has also kind of told us that it's less likely for us to see Aquaman and the Flash in the next 2 years, and that's most likely because of the failures of Aquaman 2 and the Flash movie. But while we're ignoring these characters, it also introduces us to like a bunch of new characters that we could actually adapt. Like Martian Manhunter is really long overdue for a project, so if we're ignoring Jay, Barry, Wally, Arthur, Calder, and Garth, then we can definitely focus on people like Martian Manhunter, the Green Arrow family. Plenty of characters like that will definitely get introduced. Like Superman allowed us to see that cloning is something that will probably be touched upon in the future, especially with Ultraman being the complete clone of Superman. If we see Luthor use DNA from Superman again to make another clone, it will probably use his own DNA to splice with it to make like a smarter specimen, which would be where they could introduce Superboy. And if that clone has free thinking and is able to use both of his father's heritage to try and like make up for the terrible acts of one of his fathers, it could be a really good, interesting story. I think they did it before in Young Justice, and I think they could pull from that again and then just try to make him better, I guess. Obviously, we don't have any conversation about Superboy yet in the DCU, It was just something that I thought about when I was watching the 1A scene in Superman. But like I said before, there are many other like characters that we can introduce, like Martian Manhunter. He's definitely overdue for a lot of projects. And if we use the break from Flash and Aquaman, it gives us a chance to like build on the characters like him. Having such a large universe and then immediately expanding it outside of Superman with Supergirl and Lanterns will make it so that we're able to see tons of different aliens and hints at different characters. And if you're setting up a show around aliens, why wouldn't you introduce other alien characters? But there is some human characters that you'll want to introduce if you're introducing like Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart. You've got to introduce Oliver Queen at some point, especially because some of the best comics that include Green Lantern are the crossovers between Green Lantern and Green Arrow. So even though the show Lanterns will focus on Jon Stewart's origin, I'm sure that a show after it could focus on Hal and Ollie. And if you're going to do Ollie being introduced, then it just makes it more likely that we'll get to see Roy Harper in Teen Titans, or at least some aspect of possibly referencing the old Teen Titans, especially because they've made it clear that they're probably going to go for Damian Wayne's Teen Titans, especially if they go the route of introducing him in The Brave and the Bold like they're saying they will. And though it's more likely that we'll see all these other characters before we see The Flash, it doesn't stop my speculation for the future of The Flash, especially because of the Teen Titans movie. Like I've said before, I'm really, really excited for that one if you can't tell. A standalone Flash movie would probably just be like Wally's origin or a coming-of-age story for Wally where he becomes the Flash, where he takes off the mantle of Kid Flash and he becomes Barry's replacement, I guess. And if we do get Wally's Kid Flash, it'll probably just be for like a short story in Teen Titans, or probably even just a cameo. And if it's gonna do that and you're gonna want to keep the ages similar, then Wally and Dick would probably be around the same age. He would be graduating from Nightwing, just as Wally would be graduating from the mantle of Kid Flash. And they could do something like that at the beginning of the Teen Titans movie, where they take Wally and they take Dick and they're like passing on the mantle, and we just see like a reference in the background of Speedy and Wonder Girl and the first Aqualad. We could get something like that, and that would be really cool. And that could lead directly into a Flash movie where Wally is graduating from his mantle of Kid Flash and becoming the Flash. The Aquaman movie could probably do the same thing if we have something like that in the future, where one or both of the Aqualads are graduating from their roles as Aqualad. Whether it be Calder or Garth, having such a lived-in world could allow us to skip over most of Arthur Curry's story as Aquaman, especially because we've seen it before with Jason Momoa, even if that was not the greatest portrayal of it. If we see Arthur retiring from being Aquaman and wanting to just rule over Atlantis with Mera, it could focus on their lives, and it could do a lot of different stories with Aquaman in his graduated form, I guess, in his retired form. Or we could focus on the Aqualads in like team movies like Teen Titans, or maybe a Young Justice movie where we can finally get Tim Drake leading the Young Justice team like he was supposed to, like he did in the comics, because unfortunately he was really sidelined in the Young Justice TV show. If we finally get that, we could explore both of those Aqualads and have them be two different characters and both have distinct personalities and distinct roles. Maybe one is supposed to graduate to become Aquaman and the other one's just supposed to be groomed to lead Atlantis later on when Arthur is dead or unable to rule or anything. Though I get it with fans, skipping a lot of Barry's time as the Flash and Arthur's time as Aquaman could see a lot of anger from people who are fans of those characters. So maybe doing a legacy movie before that and exploring those characters before you see them really just retire or pass on the mantle could in turn make it easier for the people to reconcile with the fact that you're not going to be using their characters as you go on with the rest of the DCU. With the other rumored shows and spin-offs that may happen, but they may not happen, like Jimmy Olsen's show, we don't know if that's going to be for sure, but we've gotten a lot of stuff for it. And it would be pretty cool to see it because it could introduce a lot of different characters that were first introduced in Jimmy Olsen comics, like Darkseid for one. And if we get like the Mr. Terrific show, that would be really cool because it could build on a lot of, it could really build up the bunches of different teams that end up becoming like part-time Justice League members, but also have their other part-time jobs as this one team. Obviously, the Mr. Terrific show could introduce the Terrifics, and it could bring in Plastic Man, and it could really build on Metamorpho's character and Mr. Terrific's character from the Superman movie. These small-funded shows or big-funded shows could bring in a bunch of stories that don't like generally reach the general audience, but it would be cool to have them at least. And if they advertise them right, then they definitely could reach the audience that you're preaching to, towards the DC fans and towards all the DCU fans and all that. And there's a bunch of other small stories that you can build up, like with Peacemaker, Creature Commandos, and possibly that Waller show, the Sergeant Rock movie, The Authority, Swamp Thing, everything like that. Those are all the stories that aren't really as significantly popular as the other characters and movies that I've mentioned up to this point. Or at least they're not getting the support that the big three would get in theaters. But those are still significant stories that would be able to build different tones throughout this universe and really just establish a lot of diversity. Even if some of those projects might be rumored to be Elseworlds, it's still a possibility that they could be the main DCU and could showcase a bunch of not as well-known characters that can introduce a lot more well-known characters, because arguably a lot of these characters who will star in these shows and movies do have a lot of background importance to like DC lore, and it helps us connect to like the more well-known characters. Like for example with Swamp Thing, he's connected to the lore around the Green, which also connects to the lore around Beast Boy and the Red. And hopefully with this new DCU, James Gunn is able to build these large families and huge array of characters. It allows us to have really a bunch of different team-ups and teams for each character, and like a lot of different connections, and it could show the largeness of this universe while still being able to live in the same universe. But with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Again, I was super inspired by the videos in the description to make this video, and I really wanted to get my thoughts out alongside them. Be sure to check those out, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Okay, bye now.